Okay, so Kathy spent the past 14 years helping neighbors and communities affected by large-scale animal production by providing technical assistance and expert testimony at appeal hearings. Her background includes a BS in petroleum engineering and a master's in civil engineering. She worked for the state of Oklahoma for 6 years in water quality permitting before going out on her own. Since 1997, Kathy has worked on CAFO rules and regulations in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, New Mexico, and Indiana. She has reviewed over 150 permit applications in nearly 20 states, including Pennsylvania. In addition to CAFO issues, Ms. Martin has been following the hydraulic fracturing issues for the past 2 years and serves as an environmental stakeholder on the Stronger Board, which is a nonprofit organization that provides third-party audits of state environmental regulations related to oil and gas exploration. Today, Kathy will help answer the question, why should we care about hydraulic fracturing in the Marcellus Shale?
Okay, I don't stand still very well, so I'm going to have to. Okay, thank you. And I usually come out here and talk about CAFOs and pollution from the lagoons and everything, so I thank Jillian for taking care of all that heavy lifting. And I'm so excited to see young people in the room.
Thank you, Ms. Scientology.
Yeah, young people.
Delaware
You know, when we look around and I had one gray hair the other day, my sister pulled it out. But when I started fighting CAFOs, I was in my 30s, and I didn't have much credibility. And I always wished I was an older guy with gray hair that people would listen to what I had to say. When we first started fighting CAFOs, I would talk about pathogens in the wastewater, and attorneys and judges would literally laugh at me. Okay? And of course it was true, and of course it was right, but it takes years and years of people getting sick before that credibility starts to come back around. So I hope, as a young person, you don't have to deal with that. Anyway, we're going to switch gears a little bit about hydraulic fracturing in the Marcellus Shale. In my other life, I was a petroleum engineer. Early on with my dad, we had an oil company in Natchez, Mississippi. But in '87, when I graduated with a PE degree, the price of oil went from $70 to $10. And my dad said, you better look for another way of earning a living, so I went into environmental engineering. Go to the next slide. Just to give you a perspective of what's going on in Pennsylvania, the Marcellus Shale, of course, sweeps across the state, mostly in the north and the west, hits into New York, Ohio, and a little bit of West Virginia. You have had, of course, the very first oil well was drilled here in the state of Pennsylvania, so you're a long-time oil and gas state. This is nothing new to you. I would like you to look at just the number of gas wells across the United States. Pennsylvania has 55,000 as compared to Oklahoma, 40,000. And of course, Texas, 87,000, which would be our strongest natural gas states. That's not necessarily the quantity of gas, but the number of wells. Because if you look at Alaska with just 261, or the Gulf, very few wells, but a tremendous amount of volumes. Go to the next slide. What's happened in the past couple of years is a direct result of drilling in the Barnett Shale in Texas, by Dish, Texas, and the outcry from the people who have had their water wells polluted, have experienced earthquakes, sedimentation in their water, almost a complete destruction of the surface of their communities by large drilling pads, all this kind of thing that happens when you do anything fast. Even when they did CAFOs fast. In Oklahoma, we went from 40,000 pigs to 1.4 million pigs in 1 year. When you do something fast like that, you affect a lot of people very quickly. We had thousands of people in the capital in Oklahoma upset about CAFOs. So we got regulations very quickly because they irritated a lot of people overnight. Same thing is kind of happening here with the Marcellus Shale and the Barnett Shale, and pretty quickly in Arkansas, they have a shale gas system too, is that the industry is just plowing through, and they're drilling thousands of wells in a relatively short period of time, affecting a lot of people rather quickly. And then they're doing what industry always does, and they say, there's no proof of pollution, we would never do anything to harm the environment, we're stewards of the land, it's just because you're afraid of something new, you just don't know what's going on, we know what's going on. It's the same story, and it's not necessarily true. And the PR that the industry came out with on hydraulic fracturing was that there was 1 million wells drilled using hydraulic fracturing over the last 60 years with no proof of pollution. I was just in Little Rock a month or so ago at a leadership conference on a natural gas panel with the same exact statement, and I said it's not entirely true. Yes, we've been fracking wells for 60 years, but we've been fracking them in a different manner than what we're doing right now. 60 years ago, you had to drill a well straight down. You could not deviate very much of an angle. There were tools that determined the angle your well deviated, because you couldn't park yourself on a property line and angle up under somebody else's property and produce their oil. So you couldn't deviate more than 3 degrees. These horizontal wells go down and they deviate, all the way, and they're horizontal out to 1 mile. It's a completely different kind of drilling and completing a well. 60 years ago, if you fracked a well, they threw nitroglycerin down there. They did all kinds of crazy things. And my water flooding teacher at OU's, when one of the kids asked him, well, how do you know the fracture works? And he says, well, as soon as they make a petroleum engineer that's short enough to go down there and look, we really don't know. We just have to run tests, and if things flow, great. If they don't, throw something else down. Okay? That was 60 years ago. All right? And the industry is very sophisticated. But to take credit for all those years of drilling and all those years of fracking in what's going on in this very short period of time is it's very insincere. To say there's no proof of groundwater pollution is just like what the ag industry says, that there's no proof that the lagoons leak. Okay? But they're not taking groundwater samples. They're not monitoring the mass balance on the lagoons. They don't know how much wastewater is seeping because they don't measure. But they'll be quick to say that there's no pollution. And just as we said to the CAFO industry, the lack of data is not proof of no pollution. The same thing we have to say to this industry. Okay. For the most part, the oil and gas industry is regulated by states under RCRA. The preamble of RCRA, which is the hazardous and solid waste rules of our United States, the preamble itself was built or written to exempt the oil and gas exploration activities from hazardous waste and solid waste rules. Okay, I actually took a course on that in graduate school. We studied the preamble for all the exemptions of RCRA. Otherwise, everything they're doing should be regulated by RCRA. In the preamble, it says that the states are required to develop environmental regulations for oil and gas exploration, and that EPA is responsible for making sure that the states do a good job. So from that, the IOGCC, which is the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, they developed some guidelines, and then some states were, their regulations were reviewed against those guidelines. There was some falling out by the environmental community, and a new organization was formed called Stronger, and I'm a board member on that organization. We do voluntary audits of state oil and gas regulations against a set of guidelines in an attempt to satisfy the exemption for RCRA. One of the more insulting responses by industry in the paper is to say that bubbling gas or methane in groundwater wells is from a septic tank or anything else except what they're doing. Possibly a bad cement job at the wellbore. But they don't want you to look at what they're actually doing. And what they're actually doing is, instead of 1 well and 1 frac job, they're having 10 to 20 wells, sometimes now up to 40 wells per pad, fracking up to 10 times per well. Okay? So let's say 10 wells, 10 fracs, that's 100 frac jobs on the same wellbore. Okay? But those frac jobs are also going a mile out that way, a mile out that way, a mile out that way, a mile out that way. all the way around. And there's nothing, there's no cement out there, okay?